So, the question I have today is why do you think that some businesses are successful during COVID and others are not?
It's a good question.
In my experience, they have, it's not related to the industry, service, or product that they're offering.
Yeah, no, I'd say that, I think it's a good question because it's multifaceted. Um, some businesses were kind of set up for COVID. So the companies that, well, let's get the obvious out of the way, right? Like anything that was mandated to close. So in California, for example, there's this big uproar about restaurants. Like restaurant and bar owners have done everything they could to basically follow the rules and make sure that they're listening to the city and the state. And the city and state just kept changing everything, saying, hey, you can't have indoor dining, but then, well, now you can't have outdoor. Well, now, social dis and everything just kept changing. So these guys are getting hammered through no fault of their own. Right. And then, but yet, like I was watching one thing earlier today and the guys were saying, look, malls are open, these stores are, so people can go into malls, walk around as long as they're waiting in line and their distance, they're fine. But yet, if we have outdoor dining, which the CDC says is okay, like that's fine. And they're being shut down. So that thing is kind of hard. I'd say then the next level of it is like, let's say, bigger companies who had a larger e-commerce presence have obviously done really, really well because, even if you hadn't shifted to e-commerce yet, say you were a small business that you were selling on Etsy, like Etsy had an ecosystem where you were able to like really produce products and get them out there. But some companies just, kind of weren't built for that. They were very reliant, especially retail companies that were reliant on people coming through mall traffic and, cinemas and all the different areas that, they would have shops. They just weren't set up to really adjust to then have their business be going online. Same thing with some restaurants. A lot of them, they weren't familiar with the processes of, let's say, Uber Eats or a DoorDash. So, I think in our new kind of technology age, there's something very apparent about the idea that you have to adapt to this. I don't care if you're in retail, if you're in healthcare, if you're, I mean, even thinking healthcare, hospitals close, elective surgeries, things like that. Companies that had, telemedicine services or things that they can do prescriptions online, they were going to do okay. I mean, so it's kind of like, is your business set up for the 21st century for real, where you're able to adjust to the new technologies and people staying at home, people getting deliveries through all kinds of web services like Amazon. So those businesses crushed. And I think the ones that weren't as prepared, and some had no choice, right? Because some were just being shut down regardless. And I even wondered myself how some of these places stayed open where they would have signs outside saying, hey, we're open, but like just for pickup and, delivery. And you're like, well, what are the odds that people are going to come to your restaurant when there's, a billion places, like especially massive chains, like when you're going on an Uber Eats or a DoorDash or something, you're just scrolling through the massive companies like Panda
Right.
Express and McDonald's and Chipotle and XYZ. So it's a super interesting question to think about. I think the laws and regulations basically hindered some businesses to a point where they weren't able to function. And then I think the other thing was just if you weren't ready for technology. I think it's really the only way to answer it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think what's interesting is that I've seen some businesses, that were not able to go online still thrive, like my buddy's woodworking company, for example. And I don't know if that's because people are home and those with expendable income are taking care of all of the home improvements and stuff like that now. But I just always thought it was fascinating why some businesses just seem to be thriving and others, others, like you said, aren't for obvious reasons. But
Yeah. Well, and I think, what something like the woodworking company and even the home improvement stuff and the kind of it kind of leads me into the idea of the rise and like a lot of the ulterior or alternate assets that people were kind of getting into. So like, yeah, when you're sitting at home, it's pretty obvious. People go, oh, that's true. Home Depot and Lowe's and all the home improvement companies will do well because, I mean, I'm sitting here looking at my place going, it's nice, but it could be better. Or the people who are sitting there and going, well, I'm super disorganized. Let me go buy a new shelving system
yep.
because, one thing that I think is hard, and these are the things that I think are super hard to, project out is that if you're working from home, let's say your wife's working from home, your kids are doing school from home,
That's
that
us.
changes the whole dynamic of how you have to like, okay, well, where do I work? How do I get this done? How do I organize these things when I'm also factoring in two, three, four more people?
Right.
So, I don't think it was just home improvement. I think it was literally like home organization, home division, home, like, it's like, because your house is now like a school and a hospital and a workplace. So like that I think that gave those companies a really great advantage. And I think people, whether it was, expendable income or not, I think you had no choice, and then if you can't go to the mall, if you can't go watch a movie, if you can't, take a trip, well, then even buying things like a new PlayStation or gaming stuff, like, those things we're going to ramp up too, because, well, like, what else do we do at home all day? Like, when we
Right.
don't have, so let's buy a new board game for the family. If you're single, let's buy a new drinking game. Let's get a new PS5. Let's get, we wanted to have just things to keep us entertained. So it's really hard to project that out. Like, I think, even at the beginning of this, I kind of, pictured, oh yeah, Amazon's going to do great. Everyone has to be home. But then when you think about how deep that goes, you think about the companies like a Wayfair or an Etsy that literally crushed even Amazon and Apple and the massive players, because
Right.
people had to have something to do, and they were, upgrading furniture, improving the houses, and the ulterior assets, like, things like or alternative assets like sports cards and things like that. Like, before the Jordan documentary came out on ESPN, I was like, I was hearing about it, like, oh yeah, Jordan, and everyone was like, I heard a couple of articles talking about like how like sports cards and like LeBron's rookie card and Jordan's were booming. And they were like, yeah, people are just, just like sitting at home working on their house. They're sitting at home and they're going through all their old stuff. And they're just like, let's just see what I got. So as you're organizing, you're like, oh yeah, look at all these old baseball cards and basketball cards. And I was always a big like Shaq fan, like my whole life growing up. And so from the time I was 13, 14, I collected, pretty much every Shaq rookie card that he has, and second year card for the most part. And I was like, well, I should probably just, pull those out of the closet and just take a quick look. And then I even realized, like, hey, I had so many, some Jordan cards, Magic Johnson, old baseball cards, like some old coins. Like, I just went through everything. I'm like, wow, I had a lot of stuff I didn't really realize. And then I started going to some of the collectible stores and sports card stores, and those guys were telling me, like, yeah, like, my whole career owning a sports memorabilia store, never had a time like this. Like, they were through the roof. Like, they couldn't keep up with the demand.
Right.
Like, even, and they had to put limits, because I remember I was trying to buy I think these things called top loaders, which is like, you take your card, you put it in like a protective case. They had limit. It was like it was like going into a mall like during toilet paper
Trying to get toilet
Armageddon,
paper.
right? It was like,
Right.
you can only buy 2 packs. That's it. You couldn't even find the sleeves that protect your cards because they were sold out. You go
Right.
on Amazon and those things, call it, I don't know, like 600x the price to try to buy it on Amazon. It's like, and then you go to the store and they're like, no, you can't. We can't. We have to take care of all of our customers. Like, you can't buy 100 of these things.
Right.
So like those are, some weird, like, other things that you didn't really think about, but you go, wow, yeah, no, it makes perfect sense.
It does make perfect sense. I mean, not that I did anything special, but everything behind me,
Mhm.
that wasn't here before COVID. So I
Yeah.
imagine, people having the desire to hire painters or put in that new wood accent wall, or whatever that looks like, for that reason, is that we have a presentable background when I'm working.
Yeah, no, I mean,
That's a good
it's
point.
all of those things. Yeah, it's just so crazy, and that's why I think this COVID period has been so unique for everybody, in terms of not just your business, but I think in terms of, relationships and family, and, a lot of couples getting into like, massive fights, because, like, hey, we've never really spent this much time together in the same house, because usually wake up, go to work all day, and, we spend a few hours, and no, we're great. Like, and
Right.
you spend all day together, you're having conversations you didn't have before, you're dealing with issues you haven't faced yet, you're talking about problems you haven't solved yet, from a, isolation standpoint, depression, loneliness, suicide. Like, I mean, there's just so many ramifications of this stuff that have been brought up, that I think that we're all now becoming aware of. And I guess, in terms of business, those things create different marketplaces in ways that it's hard for us to see.
This has been The Invested Life with Adam Khalil. Subscribe, like, comment, but most importantly, share the information you learned, and share the video with a friend or someone who you think might find value from it.